I realized stepping into this, I've got a peanut gallery here. And I've been part of peanut galleries before, so I'm anticipating some of your shenanigans. Dale. Thank you, ladies, Charlotte and your crew for putting this together for me. I really appreciate it. And yes, I think I'm going to get away with getting the last word here, which is nice. So what's next? That's a question that I'm getting from a lot of people. So to answer that, I want to speak to three different areas. I want to provide an explanation, an observation, and an exhortation. An explanation as to what makes me tick. I think you've seen a little bit in the slideshow that we have here. I want to make some observations about life. And I want to conclude with an exhortation. One of the things that Melody and I learned on a long time ago is that it's not about us. Everything you'll see up here on that slideshow demonstrates that mindset, that it's not about us. There's a lot more to it. And I think you're getting a flavor of some of that by what was shared by everybody here. So here's an explanation as to what makes me tick. It's real simple in my mind. I'm a time traveler of sorts. And I'll explain that. As a youth in Ohio, in the Midwest, I would grab some gear on a Friday afternoon, my dog, and head out to the woods, which was about a mile distance from me. And that's where I'd spend my weekends. Halfway there was this big lone tree in the middle of these farm fields, which surrounded our home there. And we lived on a ridge which looked down into a lowland down below us. But halfway there, we'd stop underneath that big tree and just sit down. And I did that, started doing that at a relatively young age. And I'd sit there and I'd try to imagine what's ahead of me. What's my future going to look like? So here you got a 12-year-old kid that's going, what is it going to be like to have a job? What is that job going to be? Am I going to continue playing sports when I get older? What is it going to be like to be married? That was an intriguing question to me. But I had a lot of different questions that came from trying to imagine what the future looked like. And that's how we approach so many of our projects, honestly, more than the other, is we tried to look ahead on what was in the future for that customer, for that project, and try to figure out answers to the questions that those imaginings would bring. But in fall of 1971, I had an encounter with God. And I found out that I was asking the wrong questions. That reframed my whole view of life, relationships. And I found out that a lot of the questions weren't really that important. And what came from that was my sense of place. How did I fit into the scheme of things? What was that going to look like? We have a friend who has mentioned to me several times, Pride, I think you're one of the most self-actualized people I know. And my response to him wasn't, I don't think that's it. I think you're misinterpreting that. I think what it is you sense my sense of place. I know where I fit in. My life is determined, my actions are determined on how I fit into the bigger picture. So my walks to the woods changed with my dog. it became very precious to me. Because part of that journey was understanding the impermanence of life, experiences. And so I made it a habit. When I sat under that big tree, halfway there, with that panting dog laying down in the grass beside me, as I looked to the west at the setting sun coming down, feeling that breeze on my face, I burned those images in my mind. I determined at that point that I was going to make it a point. It didn't have to be a big event. It could be the most mundane, the simplest experience. But to make it a point to stop and burn that moment in my memory. To the point where years later I can still recall those things. I can still recall that big dog and the feel of the muscles in his back, and the hair, and that cool breeze coming up out of the valley down below me, blowing on my face, and the smell of the turned earth in the fields around me. It's like I'm there. That's how disciplined I became at doing that. So speaking of memories, I have this hat here. If you've watched any of the slideshow, you should have seen this hat. And on this hat are pins of national parks and other places that we took all those kids to during the cloud fire. It started out as a means of commemorating the places that we've been, but then it actually became something more than that. But to appreciate that, I have to tell you a little bit about how we started Cloud Fire. We started hosting a group, a Bible study at our place in Woodland Hills, for a group that involved going through experiencing God. And part of that study revolved around spiritual markers. What were spiritual markers? So when Moses was leading the children of Israel through the desert, there were different events that were commemorated by the Israelites piling those stones in a place. There were times when they crossed waters, or got part of the waters, and they piled up those stones in the middle of the river to commemorate that. But the reason was God wanted them to remember what took place there, what He did, and how that affected them. So I resonated with that. Because those times I sat down or stopped to burn that particular experience that I remembered in my mind became incorporated into that pathway of spiritual markers in my life. It integrated well with that. And what I found is that there's been a huge benefit of having those markers, because what it does, what it forces you to do is you look back and forward, back and forward, as you realize you get a bigger perspective of things. You get a grasp of the larger picture. Again, back to my point about having a sense of place. That resonated deep in me to the point where I could have confidence in the road ahead, because I had a better grasp of the big picture. And I found that those spiritual markers in my life also further cemented my understanding of place in life, especially when it came to relationships. More pointedly, relationship I share with my lovely bride, if you will, Charlotte, with my lovely bride. But it's not even just that. It's also the relationships that I've shared with each one. And the times that we've shared. So my observation is this isn't so much about my retirement as it is, or not retirement from my profession, from my job. It's more about a love story. Makes sense? And the slideshow that you've seen represents that. It's also about the fellowship I've had with those who become very precious to me, which all of you are in that family. So my exhortation, have your priorities in order. Life is meant to be lived in a larger scale than what many of us do. It's not about the job. It's not about your profession. It's about those relationships. Just like this hat. It commemorates the places and events and experiences. More importantly, it reminds me of the relationships I've shared. So it isn't the places that are important, it's the people with whom you share those experiences. Secondly, become a time traveler. Incorporate spiritual markers into your life, or semblance thereof, of some time. Make it a point to stop. Even in the most mundane situations, look around you and the people you're there with, and remember that. Remember that time, as simple as it may be. Because being able to look back with the long lens of time at those markers has a way for preparing you for what might lie ahead, good or ill. It will frame your life in a way to where your response to those circumstances and situations can be much more than you thought yourself capable of doing. For example, Melody flew down here for this party. But over the last couple of days, she's had an opportunity to spend time with 3 of her lifelong friends who each have someone that they just entered into hospice with. And because of Melody's experience of working in hospice for the last 4 years, and because of what she did with Cloud of Fire and ministry, her experiencing a larger perspective that she's able to share with her friends has helped prepare them for the coming days ahead, for good or ill. So lastly, just kind of sum this all up. Part of what is next. Well, through the long lens of the markers in my life, I'm prepared to cherish and relish what lies ahead. And I'm thankful for the experiences that I've shared with each one of you here. You've all become an important part of the story that I remember and that I hold on to. I think as each of you shared, you've noted that it's difficult to separate Melody and I in that conversation. It's difficult to separate us from the relationships that we've had the opportunity to share and experience. Because that's our story. So lastly, I'd say, all of you, my friends, are exceptional. I hope you know that. I hope you recognize that. And I hope you push each other like steel against steel, and becoming more and experiencing more in the life ahead of you. It's not about us, it's about each of us together. So thank you very much.